Welcome to the Press Box Podcast. Hi, I'm Ralph Miranda. My co-host Joseph Miranda will be joining me shortly. We're back. Sorry we've been away for so long, but obviously life gets in the way sometimes, but we're going to try to get on a more regular schedule for you. But there is a lot to talk about today. Lots happened since our last podcast when we talked about the Masters and Major League Baseball and a few things of that nature. But the NFL Draft, of course, that's been a while now. But right now we're in kind of what I call the sweet spot of sports. We've got the NBA playoffs finals going on, the Stanley Cup finals going on. We've got the U.S. Open in golf coming up in a couple weeks. Major League Baseball is kind of hitting that summer stretch now. Some of the better teams are starting to get to the forefront. There's been a few surprises in Major League Baseball. So we've got lots to talk about, and we want to remind you once again that our podcast is brought to you by Bonus Room Art. Go to www.bonusroomart. Check out all the Jaclee prints and check out the media tab and some of the things that our producer Nathan is working on. We appreciate you doing that. Make sure you go to @PressBoxPod, our Twitter account. We've got lots of things on there. We'll be promoting this podcast as well as some other things. So we're hitting the stride now. We're getting into the summertime, baseball. We've got football coming up here in a couple months. So sports are starting to kick off. So stay with us and join us right here on the Press Box Podcast.
And here we are back in the Press Box Podcast once again, and let's go ahead and start with a current topic right now, because as we sit here and record this on a Monday morning, last night was Game 2 of the NBA Finals, which has culminated another NBA playoff season here, and the Warriors are again up 2-0 on the Cavs. Fourth year in a row that matchup has happened, so not much new in terms of the matchups you're going to see there, and really it's played out like most people would expect so far, I think, with the Warriors taking that 2-0 lead. And I'll throw it to you in a second, but just my first thought is the series is over right now, because, I mean, the Cavs, Game 1 was their game to win. I mean, you get 51 out of LeBron, you take the Warriors to the brink, and you still can't pull it out for reasons we'll discuss. But I think if they win Game 1, it's maybe a different series, but the series is definitely over now.
Yeah, and I agree with you there. And the only thing different about this series as opposed to the last three, you mentioned that this was the fourth time in a row these two teams have met. The only difference, I think, is that this year each team wasn't really expected to make it there in a way. Like the Cavs definitely weren't. And the Warriors, even though they were still the defending champs, the Rockets seemed to be the team that had dominated the West.
You could argue that the Cavs weren't expected, but I think the Warriors were expected. But this is the first time there was a serious challenger that could actually take them down, which is the Rockets. Right.
And we found out how much of a serious challenge they were without Chris Paul, right?
Right, absolutely, yeah. So thus we get the same matchup. But, I think Game 3 is Wednesday night. That'll be in Cleveland. Do you see Cleveland winning a game at home, or do you think it's going to be a sweep?
That's a really good question. Last year we were in the same situation, if you remember. They went back to Cleveland down 2-0. Cleveland could not win Game 3, but they did win Game 4. Right. Now, I think there's a chance that Cleveland can win Game 3. And the reason I say that is I think the Warriors, and I'm not a basketball aficionado, but I don't think the Warriors are quite as strong as they've been. And I mean, I think they can be had a little bit. Cleveland has proved that they can play good defense on them. If Cleveland can shoot well and LeBron gets his 40 to 50 points, I think they can take Game 3. So I think there's a better chance for them to win Game 3 this year than there was last year. But either way, I don't see them coming out of Cleveland any better than down 3-1. I really don't. And so I don't see them winning 2 games in Cleveland. Let me put it that way.
Right, and it's 2-2-1-1-1.
Yeah, it went back to the 2-2-1-1-1.
Right. 2-2, yeah. So I would agree with that. I think that they have a chance to win one. But ultimately, it's going to be the Warriors, which brings us to the next question of who do you see right now as Finals MVP? I think it's got to be Curry at this point, right?
Well, I tell you, to me, you're probably right, but to me, it's what's his name? Kevin
Durant.
Durant. Yeah, I'm sorry. For a minute, I drew a blank. Yeah, Durant. I watched most of the second half last night, and Durant was the guy that was pulling them out. Cleveland would pull it within 5, pull it within 6. Durant would come down and hit a fadeaway jumper, and he couldn't miss on those short-range jumpers. I think Durant is really the MVP of that team, to be honest with you, because you take Durant off that team right now, I don't think they're even in the finals.
Yeah, absolutely. But I'm just looking at it more of.
You're right.
There are 2 titles before you had Iguodala win it, and then you had Durant win it last year. So I think
true.
They feel like, we got to get Curry an MVP.
And Curry did set a record last night for I think it was most 3-point field goals made in an NBA Finals.
Yeah.
So you're right. It'll probably be Curry and
I saw a stat too where if the Warriors win, Curry will become the 6th player in NBA history with 2 MVPs and 3 NBA championships.
I saw that. But either way, I mean, no matter what they do, the media still wants to figure out ways to make LeBron the greatest player in the history of basketball.
Right.
Last night all they could talk about the Cavs were down consistently in the second half by 9, 10 points, but all they could talk about was the fact that LeBron may possibly take over the scoring title all time from Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, which I thought was kind of a stupid thing to be talking about at that particular time.
Yeah, I mean, I guess they're looking for stuff to talk about, but theoretically, it depends on if he wants to or not. If he plays long enough, he'll do it eventually, But yeah, I mean, they could probably find better stuff to talk about than that. But let's go back to game 1 real quick too at the end there. That play with J.R. Smith was obviously, if you're following the finals, most people have seen. I really don't think he knew the score. I think he thought they were ahead, and if you look at the video, you can see him kind of mouth that to LeBron on the court. I thought we were ahead, and of course he denies it, or he's come out with a few different stories afterwards. Right. It's typical of him, but that's absolutely ridiculous.
That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. I don't care if you're a Little League player, okay? If you're a 14-year-old player, even a 12-year-old player, you got to know if you're ahead or behind. Right. I mean, what that tells me is one of 2 things. Your head's not in the game, right? Because if your head's in the game, all you got to do is look at a scoreboard, and you should know what the score is. Right. And sometimes you don't even have to do that. So, yeah, that was the most boneheaded move I've ever seen in sports, probably, with the exception of maybe Chris Webber passing the ball to a North Carolina player in the NCAA Finals in '93, or James Worthy getting a pass from the Georgetown. Yeah.
Weber called the timeout.
That's right. Weber called the timeout, and the Georgetown player, I forget his name, passed it to James Worthy in the NCAA championship game back in '82. Those were bonehead moves. This guy's a professional. Right. I mean, he's getting paid big money. Yeah. How can you make that mistake? How can you? Because all he's got to do is put a shot up or kick it out to LeBron, and you got a chance. But in this case, they didn't have a chance.
Yeah, I know. And he's a clown anyway. I mean,
he is,
if you remember, I may have been last year, the year before. There's that video of him going to shake somebody's hand during an inbound play in the middle of a play where he didn't know that they were live or something. And there's videos of him untying guys' shoes in the free throw line. I mean, the guy's a total clown, and I mean it's ultimately LeBron's fault because he's the GM of the team.
Exactly.
He made it known that he wanted the Cavs to sign J.R. Smith to that deal he's on. So I mean. Let's put it this way. If you're on the team, LeBron wanted you there.
Right. So
he should have realized that when it comes to these crunch time moments that these guys aren't the guys, especially these guys that don't have it mentally.
Yeah, and here's an interesting theory to throw out, and you tell me what you think about this. I'm probably way off base, but it's good discussion fodder. I wonder if LeBron, knowing how great he is, he knows how good he is, LeBron. I wonder if he wants lesser guys around him to make himself look like the guy who's carrying the team.
Yeah.
Now, you could argue that that's a stupid thing to say because he did go to Miami with Bosch and with Wade. Right. But it's almost like he wants to carry these guys so that they can say, I'm the guy who carried them. Right. Whereas if he had a Durant or if he had a Curry, some of the luster would be taken away from him.
That's interesting because I think that if you look at his career, his first 7 years in Cleveland, he got a taste of the finals and got swept, okay? And I think that he realized, okay, I want to win championships. So I'm going to go with these guys in the Heat.
Right.
But then, they lost to the Mavericks. They got a lot of criticism of all different directions.
Right.
But he got his championships there.
Right.
So coming back to Cleveland, there is something to be said for the fact that he thinks, okay, I got my championships. I know how great I am. I don't want any more blame. So
right.
If I get these guys around me that aren't very good, if we win, it's my
It's my doing.
And if we lose, well, I don't have any help.
Exactly.
It puts a lot less criticism on him than when he was with the Heat and he was expected to win.
Exactly.
So I don't disagree with that. I mean, when you look at what happened with Kyrie Irving, I'm not going to say, I don't really know the whole story. LeBron didn't run him out of town. I think Irving wanted to leave too.
Yeah, I think so.
If you really wanted Irving there, I think you could have talked him into staying maybe.
And really, Irving left on his own, but he left because he didn't want it. LeBron was the guy that was controlling things.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, it's an excellent point. I totally agree with that.
And you look at Michael Jordan. Everybody wants to talk about LeBron's better than Jordan, but you know something? Jordan realized pretty quickly, but when Phil Jackson got there, that he wasn't going to win a championship unless he changed. He couldn't take 40 points he had to dish the ball.
Right.
They got Scottie Pippen. They got a couple other guys. They started winning. Jordan didn't get 40 or 50 points. He got 25, 30, but they won 6 titles that way. Jordan didn't try to control the team. He wanted to win. Yeah, LeBron wants to win, but he also wants that control, like you said, doesn't want the blame. And I think there's a lot to be said for that because they could be a lot better team, the Cavaliers, if LeBron would just let the front office make the right decisions.
Yeah. So to wrap up with LeBron, where do you see him at next year?
Oh, that's a really good question.
So all this crazy stuff's floating around. I mean, go ahead.
No, I'll tell you, if he really wants to seal his mark in NBA history, go to the Knicks.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, at this point, you're kind of seen as somewhat of a mercenary anyway. Like you're jumping around. So yeah, the Knicks should be great because
the Knicks haven't won a title in 45 years.
Right.
If you bring a title to the Knicks,
absolutely.
Yeah, you're going to be hailed as probably the greatest player ever.
The biggest media market in the world, so all his off-court stuff he can do, what he wants.
But if you go to the Lakers, I mean, he probably would help them win a title, but I don't know that has as much bang for the buck.
I agree. I mean, I totally agree. New York would be a more exciting option to me if I was him. And you hear some stuff about Philadelphia, which I don't. If I'm those guys in Philadelphia, I don't want him.
I don't want him, exactly.
They're up and coming the way they are right now, and they're probably a year early this year what they did in the playoffs. But
here's an even better question. Let's say he goes to one of those 3 places we just talked about, the Lakers, the Knicks, or the Sixers. Which one of them, if any, would be willing to give him the type of control that he has in Cleveland?
Yeah, I don't think the Lakers would.
The Lakers wouldn't.
You got Magic Johnson, Pelinka there that run things pretty well.
The Knicks probably would.
The Knicks, I think, would.
And the Sixers probably wouldn't want to, but they probably would have to because they don't have the strong enough.
The whole process thing they're trying to build there. So they at least have like a plan. And you've heard some stuff about Houston. They're not doing it. They've got a pretty established GM there.
No.
So yeah, I mean, I think that the Knicks are a good option. I mean, I don't see why that wouldn't work.
I think that would be the place for him to go. Would be the Knicks. And before we get off basketball, let me ask you a quick question. We talked a little bit about this off air. James Harden probably going to be the MVP this year of the league, but I just don't see it with him. I mean, I know he's going to be the MVP, but he can't get it done, can he? I mean,
that's a good point. I mean, we're talking about deep in the playoffs.
Deep in the playoffs.
Right, I think he's a top 5 player in the league for sure. He has a great skill set. I saw him play in person a few years back, even before he really peaked as a player, and I thought he was excellent. But I mean, it's you can't. I mean, if you go back to last year's playoffs, which was just a weird performance. Some people thought he may have a concussion or whatever, but in this year, with Chris Paul being out in that Game 6, he's the guy. If you're the MVP, you got to get it done there.
You got to get it done. Yeah. I mean, if you're the MVP of the league, I mean, for all the things we're saying about LeBron, I got to give the guy some credit. If that's LeBron in that situation, they win Game 6. Right. Okay, so you're going to get. All right, let's even put it this way. You're going back to Golden State for Game 6. Give Golden State that. They win at home. But when you come back home for Game 7, you got to win that game. I mean, that's why you fought to get the number 1 seed, right? So that's why I don't think James Harden, to me, even though I would give him the MVP this year, I don't put him in that upper echelon of greats because of that one fact, okay?
Absolutely.
Just me.
Yeah, he's certainly not a historically great player at this point. I mean, maybe you can get there at some point, but you're going to have to get over the hump and win eventually.
I agree.
Absolutely. And okay, another before we jump off NBA here. The draft lottery.
Oh, yes, right.
We had this recently. The Suns got the number 1 pick.
Right.
Actually, I'll just pose the question here. What's your take on the whole lottery system and the whole tanking like losing on purpose to try to get the more ping pong balls, and these NBA teams that are in like, it seems like a perpetual rebuild where they just almost trying to be bad so they can get that pick, and basically what the Sixers did, and it looks like they're coming out of it now a little bit. But
right.
What's your take on the whole lottery thing?
Well, I think personally, you know me. I mean, you off air, you know me well. I'm somewhat of a conspiracy theorist. Okay, I mean, we've talked about the NBA Finals being fixed. I think the ping pong ball thing is fixed, and the reason I say that is because way back when, before you even remember, when the Knicks drafted Patrick Ewing.
Before I was born.
Okay, yeah, they got the number one pick. The ping pong balls came their way. Well, there was a lot of rumors about that the Knicks had, I think, the fewest ping pong balls in the lottery, and they ended up with the number one pick because the NBA wanted Ewing to go to New York. Now, that may or may not be true, but my point is, I think it's foolish to tank because even if it's not fixed, it's a crapshoot, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, how do you know you're going to get the number one pick?
You don't.
You don't. So why even risk tanking and putting your fans through that when it doesn't really matter? Now, if the team with the worst record automatically gets the number one pick, then I can see tanking.
That's why they don't have it that way. So there's no incentive technically to lose on purpose.
Technically, yeah. But look at the Sixers. I mean, there was a reason for that. So. I don't know. I don't agree with tanking at all. I think you ought to play as well as you can, And if you're not good enough to win, that's fine. But I don't like the ping pong ball thing. I think
it's weird. Yeah,
it's just too weird to me. I mean, I think you ought to just go by whoever has the worst record gets the number one pick, like they do in the NFL.
Yeah, but that doesn't solve the problem of teams trying to lose. It only
well, teams don't try to lose in the NFL, do they?
Well, no, but. It's different. You only play 16 games, and I don't know.
I mean, how is it? I mean, it's different, but I think you could still technically try to lose in the NFL, couldn't you? In other words, I don't see teams trying. For example, like take this year, the Colts.
Let's clarify this real quick. When we say trying to lose, we don't mean guys' effort on the field.
No.
When they're out there, every NBA, NFL, they're trying 100%. We're talking about personnel moves, roster moves. From the front office, putting the team in a position where they're not going to be great.
And let's look at the NFL last year. The Colts and the Giants were both tied for the second pick going into the last week. The Colts won, which allowed the Giants the Colts could have very easily said, hey, we're going to rest all our starters, and get the number 2 pick. Now, is the 2 pick as different? Probably not much different. But my point is they didn't do that, But the NBA guys would have done that. So I think it's an inherent league problem that's got to be solved by the commissioner that says, hey, if we see or think that you're doing this, we're going to penalize you.
Yeah, I heard an interesting concept from somebody, I forget where now, maybe it was on Twitter, that the NBA should do away with the draft and have a hard cap at whatever you want to put it at. Say it's $100 million, for example. It's a hard cap. Every team's got that, and there's no max contracts. So if the Knicks want to pay LeBron $95 million for a season, great. They've got $5 million to fill out the roster. There's no draft, and these guys coming out, if you want to overpay for a guy, overpay for him. But everybody's kind of doing their own thing each year.
That's not a bad idea, really.
And that'll break up some of these super teams because what if the Warriors? I mean, if the Warriors are paying the guys what they're paying them now, and then the Mavericks are like, hey, we're going to pay Durant this much. It's way more than the Warriors are paying him.
Right.
It maybe breaks that. That's interesting. I don't think that'll ever happen, but it's interesting.
I'm not a super team proponent. Are you?
No.
I don't like it.
No.
I mean, I don't like it at all because I think part of this people might say, well, you're a whiner, but to me, there's got to be some balance. You know what I mean? I mean, if you're a team sitting in Phoenix or somewhere that's not a big market team or doesn't have a lot of money, you should be able to compete just as well as the other teams. I mean, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that's how baseball does it, right?
Baseball's pretty balanced.
Pretty balanced. The NFL is very balanced because of the revenue sharing, and I think that's the way it ought to be in most leagues.
Right.
Because some teams in the NBA, let's face it, they don't really have a chance.
Right. Because it's just a different league. I mean, baseball, there's no salary cap, but there's only so many positions. Like, you can't sign the best 3 first basemen.
That's
you can
right.
only play 1 first baseman.
That's
NBA,
right.
it's just, there's positions, but it's all very mixed, and you can stack a lot of guys, and 1 or 2 guys will swing the team a lot more.
That's exactly right.
And of course, the NFL, there's a cap, and it's just a different sport.
It is. You're right.
But,
you're right.
That's interesting. I mean, we'll NBA offseason, you always say is like 10 minutes.
10-minute season. Yeah, they'll be starting up next Tuesday.
Training camp starts next Tuesday. But I'm sure we'll talk NBA at some point down the road again. But that's just interesting here as we wrap up the playoffs, and the finals are about in mid-swing right now. So what do you have for our next topic?
Well, let's talk a little bit about baseball.
Okay.
And I know we've touched upon this a little bit before, but before we get into an article that I read that I want to talk about, I mean, where are we at in baseball? I mean, I think the cream has started to rise to the top. I think the Yankees, the Red Sox, the Astros are the strength of the American League. The National League is a little bit different. I mean, the Nationals are starting to hit their stride a little bit, but the Braves, young team, hanging in there. Who'd have thought that
Phillies
in June?
too, yeah.
Phillies, exactly. Phillies team that's hanging in there. Dodgers struggling mightily, a team that everybody thought was going to be there this year. The Brewers leading the Central Division. I mean, who'd have thought that the Brewers would have the record that they have? And the Cubs are hanging in there, but they're not what they used to be. So what's your take on all that? I mean, the American League seems to be going according to form, but the National League doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the standings too, I mean, Houston's right there, but Seattle's in first place right now.
Okay.
They have the same amount of wins. They have 2 less losses. So Seattle's going to be there. I think they'll fall off a little bit as we go on.
They don't have Cano either.
And Cano's out, yeah. And the Angels are 5.5 back. I think they'll be around. Yeah, I mean, the American League is, like we said, going according to plan. The NL East is interesting. I mean, Atlanta's in first place, and then Washington's a game and a half out. But Philadelphia's just 3 games out. I don't think anybody saw that coming from Philadelphia.
No.
With a lot of young guys who your average baseball fan probably couldn't name many guys in that team. And then you have Milwaukee leading the Central, which is, again, I don't think anybody saw that coming. I don't think we talked about those teams on our own MLB preview show as teams that are going to win their divisions. But in the West, Arizona's in first place, and Colorado's right there. The West, it looks like the West is going to be a little battle too. You've got San Francisco in 4th place right now, only 2.5 games out. So the NL,
they're going to get Bumgarner back.
That's right,
and Cueto.
Right. So the NL is pretty wide open, like you said there. Let's see here.
I think the whole National League is wide open. I don't think you can really right now pick a team in the National League and say this is the team that's the favorite to win it.
Right. Absolutely.
I think in the American League, you can say, hey, I think it's going to either be the Red Sox, the Yankees, or the Astros. The Astros have the pitching. The Yankees have the hitting. The Red Sox have a pretty balanced team.
Right.
So I think one of those 3 is probably going to be in the World Series, just my guess.
Right.
But I couldn't even tell you who I think would be in the World Series from the National League.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like, I don't know, one of these teams in the West is going to come out of there. Arizona, Dodgers, Giants. I think the Dodgers and the Giants too will have something to say at the end, just because they've been there so many times. It just feels like, and like you said, they're going to add Bumgarner. And
right.
It's almost like they're getting a free agent or a trade deadline guy.
Right.
Even though it's their own guy, he's going to come and help. But,
correct.
It's definitely interesting season. I think that, and we'll bring our Uncle Joe on to talk Nationals a little bit here, because I'm sure he has some takes on how things are going there.
Oh yeah.
But I still think they win that division too, just because
I think so.
I think their talent will eventually prevail as we go on here, and Scherzer's rolling, and Gio Gonzalez is rolling like he's doing. Not to say that Atlanta's not a good team, but to use that term again, I think they're about a year early, maybe a year or 2 early,
right.
where they're maybe overperforming a little bit.
Well, let me ask you this question. We talked about the Phillies being a young team. The Braves are a young team. I think the Brewers are a fairly young team. You remember the great movie For Love of the Game, and when Billy Chappell was in the 9th inning, and the manager of the Yankees substitutes Ken Stroud to hit, right?
Yeah.
And Vin Scully says, he goes, what a move by Augie, whatever. He goes, putting in Ken Stroud, just young enough to not know the magnitude of the situation, all right? Do you buy into that? And what I mean by that is, do you think the Braves and the Phillies, do you think they're young enough where they don't understand the magnitude of what they're doing and they'll be able to keep doing it? Or do you think at some point it's going to hit them that, hey, we're in first place, and it's July or August, right, and they're going to start struggling a little bit? I mean, what's your take on that?
I think that that's partly true. I think right now they don't realize it because it's June 4th or so.
Right,
but I think that when they hit maybe August, September, and if they're still in this position, and then you've got just like the microscope and scrutiny of everybody, the playoffs being right around the corner, maybe more media, maybe the stadium is a little more full when they go on the road and play some of these division games. I think they'll start to realize it then. I don't know if that'll affect their performance very much, but I definitely think that they'll at least feel a little more as we get down the stretch.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think the cream, barring injuries, I think the cream rises to the top. And when you look at a team like the Nationals or the Giants who've won 3 World Series or the Dodgers who were in it last year, I think that as the summer wears on and guys are healthy, I think they'll start to play up to their capability, where I'm not sure that these young guys who've never been in that situation. You look at the Mets, for example. Let's take the Mets from 3 years ago. Those pitchers were asked to do so much, right? They threw so many innings, and it kind of caught up with them, not only physically, but maybe emotionally. And I think it's the same thing with these young teams. I think when you're asking them to pitch and play in pressure situations, game in and game out, it takes a little bit out of them until they kind of learn how to do that, if it makes any sense.
Yeah, I mean, not all. I've heard this pitching more so, but not all innings are created equal. So you could throw 7 innings in a game on a Tuesday night in June, but if you throw 7 in September or October, it's a lot more stress. Every pitch is more important, so you come out of there a lot more worn down than you do in just a typical starter.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I want to talk about an article. Speaking of baseball, we saw an article in USA Today, which we both thought was rather interesting, and they were ranking the top Major League Baseball picks. It said that of the 53 players have been selected number 1 overall since 1965, which was 53 years ago. 46 have reached the majors. 3 have not. I won't mention those guys. But so they said, who are the best of the number 1 picks? The Major League Baseball draft is tonight.
That's right.
And the Tigers will get the number 1 pick. So they ranked the top picks. Okay. Number 1 was Alex Rodriguez.
Yeah, I don't think you can argue with that.
I don't think you can argue with that. I mean, the guy was a 3-time MVP, 14-time All-Star. If the Yankees hadn't screwed him, he would have hit 700 home runs. So yeah, I think he's Ken Griffey, number 2.
Right, and I think depending on who you are, some people would probably have Griffey over A-Rod. I mean, I personally don't think that's true, but I think there is at least a conversation to be had there because he's an all-time great player too.
Yeah, and he is in the Hall of Fame.
That's true.
Already.
Yeah.
Chipper Jones, number 3.
Yeah,
got to go with Chipper Jones, right? He's in the Hall of Fame. Bryce Harper, that's it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that he's already won 1 MVP. I think at this point that he's on track to at least become an historic player. So yeah, I'd put him right in there too.
Let's digress a little bit on Bryce Harper. I think when a player amasses huge statistics in his sport, the next step is championships. Do you think Bryce Harper will stay with the Nationals, or do you think he'll chase a championship? Assuming they don't win it this year.
I know. I think he's staying there. Honestly, I don't. Of course, I have no inside information whatsoever, but I think that. I don't know. I just it's a feeling I have, I guess, and maybe it's just because I like guys like Jeter who stay with one team for so long, and him coming up at such a young age, he's got a chance to have a 20-year run in Washington. So I think he stays. I think that now, assuming the Nationals don't completely lowball him,
right?
I think they can get to the ballpark that he's looking for. So I think he stays.
Now, number 5 was an interesting pick. Daryl Strawberry of the Mets. 8-time All-Star, won the World Series in 86 with the Mets and with the Yankees in 96, 98, and 99. 335 homers, but he did have a drug abuse-stained career. So that's kind of interesting, Daryl Strawberry at number 5, according to this guy.
Yeah, no, obviously a good player. I mean, I think that Mets Daryl Strawberry is probably peak Daryl Strawberry.
Right.
Which, he's a little bit before my time. You probably know better than me, but... yeah, I mean, if you take all the off-field stuff out of it, I'd say he's arguably a top 5 guy, yeah.
Number 6, Joe Maurer. I mean, now you don't think about Joe Maurer much, but
still in Minnesota.
He's the only catcher to win 3 batting titles and the only one to do so in the American League. That's interesting.
Only catcher to win in the
Only
American
catcher to win 3 batting titles and the only one to do so in the American League.
That is interesting.
That is an interesting stat. Adrian Gonzalez, number 7. I mean, I don't see Adrian Gonzalez. Do you?
Yeah,
that high?
Go through some of the next names here.
Harold Baines, number 8.
Okay, keep going.
David Price, 9.
Right.
Justin Upton, 10.
Yeah.
Josh Hamilton, 11.
Okay.
Rick Mundy, of course, that's way before your time and a little bit before mine as well, but he was a good player. Darren Erstead, Angels. Yeah. Carlos Correa. I mean, now he's still pretty young, but I put him pretty far up there.
I mean, I think that Correa and some of these guys, even Josh Hamilton, Josh Hamilton's done now. Correa's still playing, but their ceilings are higher than the guys like Adrian Gonzalez, and
no question
they can do more than some of that. But Gonzalez had a nice career, I think.
I think Correa he arguably could be the next A-Rod.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think he's going to hit for that much power over the course of his career, but there's a lot of similarities there.
Steven Strasburg.
That's right.
Good pick. Yeah. All right, number 15. He was number 2009. B.J. Surhoff with the Brewers. Of course, that was back in the 80s. Yeah. Interesting stat of Surhoff, he played every position in the majors except pitcher over a 19-year career. Andy Bennis, another name from the past. Mike Moore, not much of a... Floyd Bannister, guy from back in the 70s. Garrett Cole was with the Pirates. I think he's I don't think he's with the Astros now. Tim Belcher with the Twins. Bob Horner. I remember Bob Horner. He came right out of college and stepped right into the Braves lineup. Never spent a day in the minor leagues in his career. Ben McDonald, old guy from the Orioles. Pat Burrell, and then number 25, Jeff Burrows of the old Washington Senators. But interesting list. I think he rated them on WAR, the WAR stat. Yeah, wins over replacement. So that's why you saw some of those names, that we wouldn't have recognized. But I think if you just look at them from star power, we didn't have any problem with the top four. But I think Correa's got to be up there. Strasburg's got to be up there. And Garrett Cole probably is up there. I think Hamilton, as you said, would obviously be up there as well. But I don't know. Interesting little stat there.
And the baseball draft is interesting because it's the biggest crapshoot of them all.
Yes.
I mean, NFL draft, especially when you're talking about first round, you pretty much know what you're getting. Like, these guys are going to start for their teams. It's pretty much
probably Hall of Famers. You would hope the Hall of Famers.
You'd hope so, but you're pretty much getting a starter for the next season. Same with the NBA. I mean, these lottery picks, you're hoping these guys can turn around your franchise. Baseball, even if you are the first overall pick, and what'd you say, 3 never made it to the majors?
3 never made it to the majors.
So I mean, if you're the first overall pick, there's a good track record you'll get there, because in some cases they may just push you there even though you're not ready. Just they say, hey, we didn't miss technically, but if you're a first-round pick in baseball, I mean, you're looking at, depending on if you come out of college or high school, 2 or 3 years before you're in the majors, and then maybe another year or 2 before you get comfortable and can make an impact. So it's not that immediate impact for the other 2 sports we talked about, but it's just interesting because you never really know, especially when you're drafting an 18-year-old high school kid.
And here's an interesting question: given what you just said, if a first-round pick. Of course, these were number 1 picks overall, but let's go with first-round picks. If they don't make it, is it the organization's fault or is it the player's fault? And what I mean by that is, in baseball, I would argue it's the organization a little bit, because even if you're the number 1 pick in the draft, you've got to be developed, right? Because if you're 18, 19 years old, you're not ready. You got to be developed, okay? Whereas in basketball and football, you're ready to step in and play, okay? So there's not a whole lot of development that has to go on. So what's your take on that? I mean, would you agree with that, or would you say that it's more the player not maybe doing what he needs to do to get to that level?
I don't know. I agree that the more development has to take place, certainly, and I think that the organization plays a bigger role, but then there's another part of me that thinks that, well, if you're that good, you're going to get there eventually. Like, you're going to find a way to get there, right? I mean, because especially if you're a position player and get drafted and you go to the minors, like, if you can hit, you can hit. Like, you're going to hit your way to the majors eventually, right? I mean, but there is development that takes place too. I mean, it's certainly more in the other sports, but I think that, especially when you talk about these first-round talent guys, it's like almost you either have it or you don't. Like, you know what I mean? I don't know. I don't know. And there are instances of this, but if you draft a guy that's and basically turn him into a big leaguer, you know what I mean? Like, you didn't see anything that you liked early, but you just I don't know. And those guys aren't first round picks usually, but it's interesting.
Yeah, and I think it's also interesting when you look at the fact that the Nationals have 2 of the top 15 in that list that are currently playing. Yeah. So, and you look at the construction of the Nationals currently with Strasburg and with Bryce Harper, and you got Max Scherzer, you got Gio Gonzalez. Scherzer and Gonzalez both in the top 10 list of wins. You got Daniel Murphy. Of course, he's been hurt. But that team is built to win. And really, this is a critical year for the Nationals. And if they don't get it done this year, I think you're going to see maybe some of those guys leave or some of those guys get traded off. But it's going to be an interesting year for them.
Yeah, absolutely.
So anyway, we'll obviously talk more about baseball as we go on because it's a long season and there's lots more to talk about, especially when we get close to crunch time. Let's touch a little bit on the NHL playoffs. I know we're both not hockey guys, but you had an interesting thing happen this year. You had an expansion team, the Las Vegas Golden Knights, make it all the way to the Stanley Cup Finals. And the Knights right now playing the Washington Capitals. Interesting stories on both ends there. The Knights, an expansion team, a lot of cast-offs, guys that weren't protected in the expansion draft, guys that other teams had given up on, and here they are sitting in the Stanley Cup Finals currently, down 2-1. The Capitals, on the other hand, have a superstar in Ovechkin, but this is the first time they've even this was the first year they even made the conference finals since 1998. So interesting setup there. And what's your take on all that?
Yeah, I mean, it's weird because I don't think that when the expansion draft actually happened last summer and they picked their guys and you saw that team, I don't think anybody thought, whoa, like they stole some guys or this looks good. People thought like, okay, whatever, like it's just your typical random expansion team. So the fact that even once they got their team together, they didn't look that great. Now they're at this point now is amazing to think about. I mean, like you said, we don't follow hockey as much, but I don't really know how they did it. Like, I mean, you think about expansion teams never win. I mean, especially their first season. You have some, like the NFL, Jaguars and Panthers, their second season got to the conference championships.
Right.
And, I mean, in baseball, you look at, let's see, Marlins won the World Series in their fourth year.
Right.
Diamondbacks third year, but you never see right off the bat this first year. But I think it's exciting for the NHL, especially with the new market in Vegas. I think that they have a pretty good hockey market there. It seems like where the fans are excited about it, and I don't know how the makeup of their team plays for the future, really. But hopefully,
that's a good point.
Did they catch lightning in a bottle this season, or is this something they can build on here? But it's a fun matchup. I mean, I know it's not. If you're a traditional hockey fan, maybe you'd like to see like an original six team in there, but just from looking at it from the outside, like Washington, Las Vegas, it's kind of a fun matchup.
Yeah, no, I think you hit it right on the head. I think that one comment you made was the key comment. Was that what's their prospects for the future? I mean, these guys were all guys that have been around the league. So are they going to be able to do it again next year, or are they going to have to rebuild? Interesting stats on this thing is the Knights, the Golden Knights, they were 500 to 1 odds at the start of the season. Right. So if you put $100 down on these guys and they win the title, you can make $50,000. Right. That's pretty interesting. Right. Second thing is they just lost 2 games in a row to Washington here in the finals. It's the first time in the playoffs they lost 2 games in a row.
Yes.
I mean, that's phenomenal. Yes. Forget about the fact that an expansion team even made the playoffs. Right. Forget about the fact that they made the Stanley Cup Finals. This is the first time they've lost 2 in a row.
I know.
I mean, that is unbelievable. And another interesting stat, which I know, is that they're the first team that is first expansion team to legitimately make the championship round in any major sport. Now, I say legitimately because back in 1967, the NHL expanded from the original 6, and they put all the expansion teams in one conference. So obviously one of those teams was going to make it to the finals. Okay. But legitimately, this is the first time it's happened, which I think is an amazing in and of itself that they've gotten this far, But I think the Capitals are going to win this thing, and the reason I say that is, they were down 3-2 at Tampa Bay in the Eastern Conference Finals, and they shut out the Lightning 2 games in a row to win that series. Their defense is phenomenal. They're moving the puck much better than the Knights are, and their speed on their shifts is much better. And I think Ovechkin is he's on a mission. I mean, I think the guy's on a mission, and I really think they're going to get it done.
Yeah, I mean, Ovechkin, I want to say his rookie year is, 03 to 05?
Yeah, he's been around a while.
I mean, he's kind of, like we talked about James Harden, I think he's kind of like a comparable guy in hockey where, he won a lot of scoring titles. And,
right.
He was kind of seen as a guy who never could quite get it done in the playoffs. Well, now he's getting it done. So, I mean, like we talked about with Harden, I think that Veskin's a similar guy who's shown that he can get it done now in the NHL.
No question, and I think to quote our president, he's getting it done bigly. I mean, not only did they beat the Penguins,
Yeah.
which a team that's eliminated them like 3 years in a row, and then they were able to overcome the Lightning down 3-2. So I think the Caps, I think they're comfortable, they're confident, they've got Ovechkin on a mission, and as much as I love the story of the Golden Knights, they've got to win tonight. If they can't take this game tonight in Washington and they go back to Las Vegas down 3-1, I really don't think they're going to be able to win it.
Yeah.
Before we close today's podcast, we have to talk a little bit about the new law that just came into effect about sports betting.
Oh, yeah,
okay?
absolutely.
I think it was a couple weeks ago, the Supreme Court cast down the law that said that sports gambling or sports betting could only happen in Nevada.
Right.
All right. Now it can happen anywhere. So go ahead.
They gave the power to the states.
They
right?
gave the power.
They can choose, right?
Correct. They can choose. Right. That's right. And one's already done it.
Right.
I think New Jersey's already done it. Delaware's already done it. Yeah. So what do you see the ramifications of that? I mean, I think it's who knows? I mean, it could be anything, right? You could have an app on your phone where you could bet.
Well, I'm sure that's it's hard to being and put in production, but yeah, I mean, I think it's fine. Like, let's put it this way. Most people are betting, especially in, like, say, the NFL.
Right.
Week to week, illegally.
Right.
Anyway, so, I mean, you take that out of the play, right, and just go to depending on what state you live in, go to your casino, wherever you do it at, and do it legally. And, I think it's fine. I mean, as far as ramifications, I saw a quote from Mark Cuban saying that the value of these teams shot up because of this ruling.
Right.
Whereas, I guess I don't totally know what he means by that, but I guess just all the new business that creates. I don't know. I mean, it's interesting. I don't know why it took this long for them to do that. I guess, but
yeah, I don't either. I mean, it's kind of,
you see some of these. I think it was the NBA and maybe the MLB who are kind of for it, and there's talk that they're gonna want percents of each bet made and all this stuff. So
right.
they probably see it as a money-making thing.
And that's probably what precipitated his comment that the value of the team's going to shoot up, because if they can get some revenue off this, right, then you're looking at another stream of revenue. Interesting thing that's going to happen, though, which, I don't know all the ramifications, but theoretically, now you could have fans sitting in arenas and making bets right off their phone, right? Yeah. I mean, like, well, the NFL, when you get to the Super Bowl, you can bet on who makes the first field goal. Right. You could now these people could be in the stands making these bets. Okay, so that's going to be interesting, and it's also going to be interesting to see how the leagues monitor it, because there's always that question of is betting going to compromise the game? And if it's not isolated to a controlled environment in a casino in Las Vegas, is that going to change any? Who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows?
It's a good question. I mean,
but we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see. So lots of good things going on in the world of sports, and I think we've touched on a few of them. Of course, we've got the U.S. Open coming up. Don't want to talk too much about that, but that should be interesting.
Yeah,
Tiger Woods.
We'll talk about that more in the future.
Yeah, Tiger Woods playing extremely well right now. His putter's not responding the way he would like it, but other than that, he's hitting the ball really well. So we got lots to talk about coming up on our next podcast.
Absolutely. So we enjoyed being back today. Hopefully we will not be on this long of a break anytime soon again here, but stay with us on the Press Box Podcast, and we will be back before you know with a new episode.